moving now out of our thoughts on threshold and crossing from the ordinary into the extraordinary. Some images now on our second theme of the day, which is water. Water, we know, of all of the elements, is the primordial element. All that is and ever will be comes out of the union of energy and water. Everything that is on the face of the earth has evolved from creatures who originally walked literally out of bodies of water and developed through time in their own way. This image, this in fact is not really a museum. It was built to house a beautiful Greek architectural unit that was mosaic that was brought from Greece. I guess a little country chapel that was falling into ruin, and was purchased somehow, and they reconstructed this as although it's a museum, when you walk into it, it's a deeply worshipful space. And the architect, to contain this little chapel, rebuilt little Greek chapel, Greek Orthodox chapel, the architect built this amazing sanctuary, and at the center of the sanctuary is this great tongue of water, this lashing tongue of water, this aboriginal, transparent fluidity in relationship to its very opposite, the huge solidity and presence of stone. So the transparency of water, the huge opaqueness and strength of stone, and yet we know, of course, that that water, little by little, can wear away even the most intensely durable stone. So the mystery of opaqueness and transparency, the great tongue of the elements, the elemental understanding of water as the source of all that is, and that all has come from water and will return to water. The understanding of all matter being reduced ultimately to its origin in water. And as the abiding primordial first principle, some of the earliest images of the Great Mother are images of her as water. This is a tiny little clay piece about the size of your thumb, if you can imagine this. And like many of the first images of her, she's simply a little wodge of clay worked by hands. You have to imagine that these early images, remember that earliest civilizations always grew up along rivers, so there would have been clay deposits in all parts of the world, except of course desert areas, and even desert areas were once viable living areas on Earth that only became deserts for all sorts of different reasons. So that the earliest images of her are simple little clay images. You can see thickness of the clay. The simplicity of her facial expressions, the little tiny breasts, the arms reduced to really tiny little appendages, and from the shoulder down to the elbow, and then the forearm actually laying over, like the forearm kind of almost like a rubbery, bending round the breasts. The image of her as water, as the source. Images like this, museums all over the world, or all over the Western world certainly, but no, sorry, I take that back, not just Western world, because certainly many of the museums in China and Japan would have the equivalent of images like this. This one is an old European one from probably someplace like what is today Austria or the Slovakian countries. So these images of her going back millennia And moving forward in time, this is from Sumerian culture, the great societies that grew up in relationship to the Tigris, the valley, the river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So here is exactly the same image you just saw thousands and thousands of years later. She is water. She's holding the vessel of herself. She is the vessel. She is holding a vessel of herself, and the water flowing from the vessel divides into two and becomes the very cloak, so to speak. So not only is she water, but the whole universe is clothed in her watery presence. And one of the most beautiful images in the whole history of art, it's called the Ludovisi throne. It's in one of the great museums in Rome. Ludovisi is the, I think 17th century cardinal who was a great collector of antiquities. And if you're in Rome, certainly be sure to see it, because it's one of the great transitional pieces in Greek art, dated about 500 BC. It has two symbolic characterizations. It can be an image, can be understood to be an image of Venus rising from the sea. You all remember the story, the mythology of Venus, that she was born not of a woman's body, but she was born of the womb of water, the watery womb of water itself. She rises from the sea and is born to the seashore, standing on a great seashell. And when she comes to shore, the four seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, come forward and clothe her with the gifts of their season. Now that there are more and more, for about the last roughly 40 or 50 years, more and more women have been studying art history, and therefore there are more art professors now who are women. And so, for instance, when I was studying art history, all of my professors were men. But now, generationally, if you take art history courses, you will be learning from women. So obviously, many of these ancient monuments have been rethought and studied through the spirits of women. So that there are some art historians now who feel that this is, in fact, not that it can't be Aphrodite, but it might also be an image of a priestess of Aphrodite, and she is rising from her ritual bath at the new moon. Some of you may yourselves do ritual baths during the 3 nights of dark of moon, so that you rise, ritually cleanse, so to speak, with the new moon as it appears in the eastern night, dawn, every 28 days, coming out of the 3 nights of darkness, of dark of moon. And in which case these figures would be her priestesses, clothing her as she rises from her ritual bath. And the understanding is that you entering into the darkness, the place of abandonment and disillusionment, to be disillusioned, to be moved down into the watery elements of your origin, to return yourself into the womb of darkness, the womb, even biologically, the understanding of returning to the womb from whom you came, but also the womb of creation. So those 3 nights when the moon has disappeared and awaits her own rebirth, you enter into that place of the watery origins to simply be renewed, reformed. And of course, many ancient religions began their liturgical month at the new moon, and all in relationship to the power of beginning, this mystery of beginning, which we have lost pretty much all traces of. The understanding that ritual isn't something you do it, you know, Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving, let's say, but in fact it's a daily, that every day you know exactly what phase of the moon you're in, and in relationship to the sun calendar, exactly where the sun is going to rise on the horizon. A beautiful, beautiful monument in art history. I lived in England for 16 years, I guess. It was a cover design for a book published in England when I lived there. Anyway, water, her three faces, her dark face, her full face, and her virgin face, her full face, and her diminishing face. And how we all participate in the mystery of water. Everything that is has come out of water in one way or the other. So we have the shell down here, this great fish, and then of course the earth, creatures of the earth, and the presence of fire in the relationship, in the appositional relationship to water, and men and women sharing this mystery with the entire animal and vegetative queendom. Water associated with the Aboriginal principle of creation. A beautiful unfinished English manuscript from about the year 1150 or 1200. God, Yahweh, as the architect of creation, sends forth his angel to draw creation out of the Aboriginal waters. So here is one of his angels, his Yahweh's messengers, literally pulling earth, the sphere of earth, out of the watery beginning. So we always understand water as the principle out of which all that is has risen in one form or the other. And water as cleansing and preparation, this beautiful image of the baptism of Christ. It's one of the great pieces in art history, the doors of the baptistry in Pisa, the Cathedral of Pisa in Italy, done about the year 1000 or into the early 12th century AD. This is, of course, the medieval period. Beautiful, beautiful bronze doors. This represents John the Baptist. You see his hand is over the head of Jesus, pouring water. The waters of the Jordan have risen up, so to speak, to clothe him. Angels have come down and are carrying his clothing as he has taken his clothes off to go down into the waters of the Jordan. John the Baptist bending forward, this tree, look at this composition, the tree bending forward, John bending forward, sweeping up the stability of the waters, and yet wavy, so that the kind of living water, and the angels coming down as sentinels of the heavenly powers. So waters as creation, waters as initiation, waters as cleansing. Image of our, whether in terms of faith we have faith in the stories of the Old Testament or the New Testament for that matter, we still can look at these images as masterpieces of what we think of as Western society, based on the Judeo-Christian religion, which formed many of our ancestors from many millennia. The story, of course, of Noah's Ark, the few good people who were saved out of a world of corruption. The image of the rainbow, God sending a rainbow to assure them that all is well, that they have come through the dark storm and have been purified in the experience. So waters of creation, of initiation, waters of destruction and rebirth. Water as we women identify ourselves with water. This again is a piece not unlike the piece we saw a few minutes ago of Persephone between the horse and the dog, arising from the underworld. Another piece from the Roman Celtic period, about the year 100, just at the turning from BC into AD, so to speak. A beautiful, beautiful image of us. Here we are, or here, and this would have been the side, so to speak, of a well. You could imagine the well. Obviously, wells were in ancient times. First of all, they were built at places where from springs, places where water spontaneously and, as it would seem, miraculously bubbled out of the earth. The water was contained in some kind of stone containers so that it could be, instead of just flowing out and flowing indiscriminately, could be channeled and contained, so to speak, for people to have a source from which to come and bring their buckets and carry it away for their various uses. So you have to imagine this as one side of four other sides, undoubtedly. So imagine this image as you, we as women, receiving the waters of the above, understanding that sweet water comes down from heavens, and of course then flows through the land and flows into rivers and returns to be sweetened again by the very power of evaporation. So we in our lives must constantly be refilled. We need, each of us in our own way, needs to make sure that we are well watered, that we know where to go for these sources. We know where to go for the water of life in our own lives. What is it that literally irrigates us, that keeps our soil and our souls watered into the deepest places? So we hold up, with one arm, we hold up to receive the grace of water, the grace that we need and flows into us if we ask, if we ourselves are open to receive it. And as we receive, we partake, it comes into our being, it energizes us in every way, irrigates us, as I say, but then we also outpour. Every one of these women has dumped their bowl, so to speak, sideways, and the water's flowing out. What does this mean? This is an image of us, each of us, in our life work, that we are open to the irrigation, to this saturation of the world of the Spirit. We incorporate, bring it into our bodies, because nothing can live without water. We must drink water, we use water, all of life. Think of the water in the earth that makes all of the earth fructify and send forth its fruits. So that all that is containing this principle of water, the reality of water, the spiritual reality of water. But it isn't just for us. We outpour, and this is the work in our daily lives. The complexity of our lives, we are all mature women, deeply engaged in our families, in our communities, in our life work. Each of us has a million stories to tell about the waters, the living waters in our lives, and how we have received and how we have outpoured. If there's one image you take away from these 4 days, this is one of the ones I want you to remember. And go to bed thinking of falling down into the darkness of that deep, deep place of darkness where we are nourished in night, nourished in sleep, and also watered. So during the night, when we seem to be inactive, in fact, in terms of our spirits, we are raising up these empty bowls, because when we go to sleep, we are depleted. We're tired, we've done a day's work, we've run out of energy, we are in every way ready for sleep. And we know that in so many ways we are deeply, deeply put back together again, in every way replenished, and most certainly our souls are deeply nourished, well watered in our sleep, in our dreams, in that place of complete unconscious receptivity, so that we awake renewed, rebuilt, reformed, reshaped, again to do our work in the world, which of course through our lifetime changes enormously. Our work when we were 10-year-olds and off to grade school obviously differs enormously than our work now. So that our work in the world changes, but our need for the nourishment never changes. The simplicity of this image, mark your soul with this image, to acknowledge the fact that you need to be refilled, because we must bless the needs of our human nature. We are filled with needs in every way, our physical needs, our spiritual needs, our psychic needs. We are needy. Life is needy. All things that live are needful. And this is good. It is good to be needful. It is good to be humbly aware and in a place of receptivity toward all of our needs, and how life in its goodness, if we are participatory in these energies, constantly refashions us day after day after day. But typical of one of her manuscripts, you see the heavenly chorus looking down and watching, so to speak, taking part in what's happening here. Two women are in this pool of living water, and the third figure, as you see, is on the edge with the red face and the red hands. This is our Lady Wisdom. We understand wisdom as a kind of fluidity. Again, this principle of nourishment, of being well watered by wisdom, so that the images of her in not only medieval manuscripts, but in fact still alive today in images from the Greek and the Russian Orthodox Church. But here she is as the guiding principle. She it is who guides us. Wisdom guides us to our needs, shows us what we need, and we all need to be plunged into these holy waters, which are formative in terms of rebirth, salvation, of structure, and just the basic understanding of cleansing, deeply cleansing ourselves day after day after day, and preparing ourselves for our work in the world. A beautiful image from the Huichol people. The Huichol people are one of the ancient America. There were hundreds and hundreds of Aboriginal Indian tribes here before Western cultures, of course, gradually overlaid it over 200 or 300 years, so that we have very few tribes left. It's the same story in Mexico. There were hundreds of tribes in what today we think of as Mexico and Central America. Few left, comparatively speaking. The Huichol people are in fact not far from where we are. They are a continuous tribe, still together as a people in northern Mexico, and their artwork is twofold: yarn paintings, which is what you're looking at, and also beadwork. Have a look at how it's made. It's like a piece of masonite covered with beeswax, and the yarn is literally pushed into the beeswax so that it stays. And the drawing is in fact the linear use of the colored yarn. And as I say, when you have a look at this, you'll see what I mean. So let's say this patch of color right here is not a painted patch of color. This is actually blue yarn laid down stroke after stroke after stroke, so to speak. The image we're looking at is grandmother water. The center of the composition, if you put an X through this square, the center is her womb area. And from her center, she sends out waters. And the above world, represented by the salamanders associated with the bringing of water, the above world brings water into our life. But the below world, in the sense that from her center, the energy radiates everywhere. These structures here are actually thrones, and they are related to these two shamans. I'm sure you know that shaman is a word for a man or a woman, and the plural therefore is shamans with an S. It's not shaman. So that very often shamans in works of art are shown as androgynous, neither this nor that, so to speak, because a shaman can, as I say, be either man or woman. So two shamans are here. They often act together. They've come out into a place to pray. They've been here before, which is why these thrones are here. They have made their prayer sticks. A prayer stick is literally a stick, a piece of a tree, a branch of a tree, which has been elaborately and ritually embellished with gifts and feathers. And the feathers hang free so that when the prayer is finished, they are driven into the soil, and they stay alive as long as the feathers blow and before they disintegrate. So the understanding of a prayer stick is the intention driven into the soil, so to speak, or propped up by rocks, and the feathers continue to move in the air. As the feathers move, so does the intention of the prayer go out from that place. And to make prayer sticks they take a long time to make, and it's one of the most, in my own experience, one of the great centering prayers in my own life is the making of a prayer stick. They take the better part of a day to really make and stay with. And the whole time you're making, you're praying for whatever that intention is. You then take the prayer stick to whatever shrine, whether it's your backyard or up a mountain, it doesn't matter. But you, as you're making it, you know you're making it to carry it someplace. One of my paintings called O Fountain Mouth. O Fountain Mouth is the opening line of one of Rainer Maria Rilke's poems, a poet that I've known since I was a teenager, and he's a much beloved poet and an important spirit in my life. This is the first painting I did after Erdemir died, and this represents Erda pouring out her blood from her mouth, and the blood pouring out from her having had her litter of puppies. This rug you will see in my studio. I call it's a Navajo rug. I've had it for many, many years, even the whole time when I lived in Europe. It was rolled up and stored in my sister's attic in Milwaukee. This rug used to come to me in dreams all the time. And it's always, even when I lived in New Mexico, when I lived in Albuquerque in the 60s, it always represented for me the Rio Grande, my sacred river. So here is the Great Mother wearing this river rug, and it's like I'm hiding inside, like a cave behind the waterfall. And the waters are pouring from her mouth, O fountain mouth, the waters of creation pouring from her mouth into her own hands is a kind of midway down, so to speak, the waters collecting in the mountains and then flowing down into our lives. These are the three dogs that Erda was the mother dog. This is her mate, Madra, and these were two of her pups at the time of the painting. Another one of my paintings, this is called The Waters of Life and Death, from her veiled source. You see she's behind a transparent veil. She's pouring out, again, pouring out the water of life and pouring out the water of death. Whether we are outpoured in from our mother's womb in the waters of birth, or whether we, as we all are, inexorably moving toward the waters of death, when we literally liquefy, however we die, whatever happens to our body after that, is a place of disintegration. Our life begins in integration, in the weaving being woven together in our mother's wombs, and then finally the disintegration as we return to her after our span of years. This is called The Sound of the Rio Grande. It was my great love of Elgar's cello concerto that for years and years and years I listened to hypnotically, and still do. When this image started appearing one day, I began to understand, oh my God, she's holding a cello. I had to phone the music department at the university and say, could I hire a student and just come and sit and draw while he or she practiced? And so, because I had no idea how to draw a cello, so I did that. And so this painting took a while to do, and it became this great, I have my own personal trinity of the Great Mother and the moon and her servant, the dog God. So the singing of in this case, a wolf. We still have wolves in New Mexico, and of course, I still hear, being this near the bosque, I hear coyotes, especially all summer. And she literally has her feet in the Rio Grande. And the understanding of sound, the understanding of music as water, that it passes through us. I myself grew up poor, so alas, I never learned how to play. I never had music lessons, but I've always been passionately interested in music, and indeed work all day with music. And when I first went to Europe, I was still a young woman. I turned 21, in fact, when I was in Europe, and I was in Greece at the time. And it was that year in Europe which opened my whole being to the power of classical music. So that was the beginning of my love of music, and it just matured over the years as I matured based on my own life experiences. But she is the song at the heart of creation. She is the sound at the heart of creation, and that watery sound, those great sighs that you get from the string instruments are the sounds I associate with flowing water. This is an image based on my time at Stanbrook, a powerful dream I had. This is me, represents me in a dream state, in a sort of off to the side, when I dreamt of the monastic church, which was a tiled floor, opening up. A natural spring from underneath the church opened up and then flooded the church, and then there were lots of children swimming in and out of this pool, this spring that had opened up. And I realized that all these children, each individual child playing in the water, was a separate painting. And it was a fabulous understanding of my work as an artist, and even my work at that time as a nun. My spiritual children were in fact my paintings that, of course, I had always been doing, but I continued to do for the 14 years I was in a monastery. This retrospective book coming out in next September, there are 3 essays in the book, and one of them is written by a woman whom I first knew in the monastery, and the name of the essay is Struggle for Solitude, and she writes about me and the function of solitude in our life, and an artist working in that kind of solitude and the imagery that came out of it. Even those of you who feel you know about my imagery, that the book will be filled with surprises. In fact, it's like you don't even know half of what my imagery is, because the imagery going back to the 60s and through my years in the monastery is completely different than what I'm doing now. And because we were poor, there was no like attic where I could leave things behind as I moved through life. So there's nothing in my life from childhood, all through grade school, all through high school, all through college, even all through graduate school. The first image in the book will be, in fact, images that I did in Albuquerque when I came out here to teach at a little Catholic college over the river in what's called the West Mesa area of Albuquerque. In fact, the college where I taught is nearly exactly opposite the river where I am right now, ironically.